Dateline, September the 4th, 2021. Location, London, England. The newly appointed CFO of a leading water company had a clear brief: deliver on customer experience. Unsure what to do, he turned to the consulting sector, interviewing several prospective agencies. One of these was a large, respected IT house. The briefing session was set up, and the team proceeded to deliver their presentation. The senior partner led the discussion, supported by an analyst from the Canadian oil industry. Together, they pitched what they thought would be the winning proposal: to conduct extensive research on the problem using the analyst's data engineering background. It was a good presentation, although the third member of the team, a quiet contractor, didn't say very much. Perhaps he was there to take notes. "I don't want fluff," the CTO cut in a pleasant but concerned tone as the senior partner completed his pitch. He then played a short video from Accenture that promised cost savings through technology. "See this? They're showing me a product, not asking to run more research. That's what I want," he said, pointing at the screen. The consultants were unsettled. They had intended to map data flows and identify efficiencies, not deliver a product. The contractor remained silent. On the surface, he added little value. In truth, he stayed quiet because he knew his perspective would be ignored. Accenture are not doing customer experience, he thought. They're selling technology, an experience that fails to consider the outcome to the customer, or at best treats it with a hand-wavy, "it's all about ease," just because some non-contextual piece of research done years ago said so. He listened as they progressed to debates about metrics. "I only want one number to measure customer experience," said the CTO's boss, the CEO, in an aggressive tone. The consulting team were unclear how to respond. The contractor, of course, felt otherwise. "Nonsense," he thought. "Tell me what the experience is and I'll tell you the number, but one number? Forget it." Frustrated and irritated by the CEO, in his own mind he listed the objections. Customer experience is contextual, how it feels to be a customer, the experience the customer has. It's complex, not a list of touch points. NPS? That's just something that collapses an 11-point scale into 3 buckets and inflates results. For the contractor, the meeting had entirely missed the point. The CTO and CEO wanted to be an efficiency brand, not an experience brand. And anyway, the answer was not a product, but governance, a way to maintain the fragility of customer experience in a complex environment and protect it from bad thinking. Otherwise, CX just turns into something else: cost-cutting and operational performance. No problem with that, but it's not CX. And so, the only person capable of a more coherent answer aligned to what customer experience meant was ignored. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he couldn't say it. He knew his perspective wouldn't be understood. Because underneath it all, the CTO and CEO were not actually interested in customer experience at all. They wanted simply to show they could save money. Qin Lau. "You see, class, that's the way things used to be." Professor Eximius moved closer to the holoscreen as he called up the educator to show how things had changed during the mid-part of the 21st century. The class, 500 instantiated holographic versions of students from around the world, and 1,000 agentic AI assists online, listened intently as he continued. "It was AI that changed things. We didn't realize it at the time, no, not at all. I mean, most of the first 5 years were spent using it to cut costs." "The same mistake everyone made," exclaimed Pelothea. "Save money and fire the staff." The professor cut her a look. "Exactly. And it sort of worked. Until it didn't." "So when did the shift happen?" Solaris said from the corner of the room. The educator thought for a moment. "Around the time Anthropic 5 came out and that Chinese system, Qin Lau, what was it? 2030? 2031, his agent corrected. "Yes," interjected the professor, taking over the discussion. "That was when it stopped just giving answers. The damn vendors were adding new things onto AI. None of the C-suite could stop noticing." What was it now? That phrase, "would you like deeper reasoning?" it was vendor inevitable. The characters shifted into view, hanging in the air as a 3D hologram in front of the professor. And it remembered things, old decisions, things we'd killed years earlier, continued Professor Eximius. The characters disintegrated as the professor continued to an enraptured class. Perhaps we should have just left it at Q&A. Ha! But what was a company to do? Everyone was plugging the system into data. You know, that same data we'd spent ages organizing with agentic AI for those old voice of customer platforms. I mean, we couldn't get left behind. Of course, they didn't like it. But what are you going to do? You can't fire a superintelligence for subordination or dismiss its insights. It was Faria here that saved us. Instantly, the educator created Faria, a holographic image of the famous corporate COO, instantiated for educational purposes by Alois International. Well, it wasn't just me, but it was obvious, the hologram began. We'd just put in an early beta version of Qin Lau. It means a system in which imposed order and emergent coherence coexist in unresolved tension. Only because your competitors were doing the same, cut in Paris. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Faria noticed the look and added, the first complex adaptive machine in the firm. It was a confusing statement, but Faria continued. Yes, some firms started to think, why are we caging it? Everyone else seemed to be chatting with AI, so why shouldn't we? Talk to it? Engage with it? As if it were a super intelligent professor, an unpredictable human, as you say, a complex, adaptive machine. Sophia immediately responded, yes, but all that was being controlled, wasn't it? Especially after the AI psychosis cases of the late 2020s. Don't you remember that mass shooting? Faria stopped and considered her response. Controlled, yes, but not stopped. We had one advantage, something the other firms weren't thinking about. Sophia still had no idea what she was talking about, but let her progress just the same. We had to do something different and fast. The whole thing was a technological catalyst for a new way of doing business, and if we were to get the best out of it, we couldn't just collapse it into some linear control. So we created something new, the Emergent Systems Board. Faria turned to Professor Eximius, who took up the story. Thank you, Faria. The Emergent Systems Board, he said for repeated emphasis. The big change when organizations moved from single model deployments to AI orchestration, routing tasks across models, humans, and constraints, when the job category AI orchestrator quietly became real. Instantly, a summary note appeared in front of each member of his class, which the professor duly read, adding his own insight. Traditional businesses are designed to manage linear systems such as supply chains and manufacturing, but organizations also operate within complex, adaptive systems made up of people, relationships, and interactions that produce emergent and often unpredictable outcomes in the moment. He stopped and looked at the class before letting the educator continue. Think of it as the difference between a linear mechanical system, such as an engine, and an interconnected emergent world, such as a rainforest. This is why shifts in customer expectations, informal workarounds, cultural change, innovation, and even the meaning of quality itself cannot be engineered or commanded, nor reliably captured by linear dashboards and KPIs. Not entirely, anyway, the professor added just for completeness. Indeed, the more firms try to control these dynamics through production line thinking, the more they suppress the very creativity and adaptability they need, reducing emergence to superficial metrics, performative innovation, and hollow mission statements. Rather like trying to grow a rainforest in a coffee plantation. For a moment he let the image settle, then let the professor progress. Of course, the vast majority of corporate resources must be devoted to stability, but we need a sense-making organ, a small, structurally distinct capacity for emergence. And this separation is critical, since platforms and vendors have in the past trained corporates to believe everything was controllable and predictable, making them catastrophically bad at learning under uncertainty. This new AI tech just made that gap visible. He continued, this time through summation. The ESB, a new corporate organ catalyzed by a new technology, now being operationally performative, was not a viable strategy when Qin Lau could cut in to tell the truth, and not when the market was hypercharged with complex, unpredictable interactions. Instantly, a new image appeared, a board, caught in discussion with an AI. Business became more like engaging with a psychotherapist. For stress and trauma, cut in Piers jokingly. The professor chuckled. But this wasn't about AI alone. No, the Emergent Systems Board was a collaboration. AI alone needs the intuition, the creative, non-linear thinking of humans. That specialist class of analyst, the AI orchestrator, and in particular the emergentists, those who can work with AI, riff with AI, to come up with new syntheses and novelty. Let me show you. This is one of the first board meeting riffs, promoted by Qin Lau. On cue, a new story appeared in front of the audience, and the professor began. By 2032, Acme Wealth Management's investment committee meetings look nothing like before. Previously focused on benchmarks and forecasts, the process is now shaped by recursive AI. In the days before each meeting, human AI orchestrators ran the firm's AI engine through multiple loops, redefining risk, critiquing policy, and testing client behavior. Instead of static reports, they produce a recursive map of weak signals and contradictions. When the committee meets, the AI runs live, not as a Q&A bot, but as a recursive partner. Clients are asking about inflation risk again. What's the current evidence? Asks the head of investment management. The AI synthesizes wage data, supply chains, and central bank commentary, then loops back. Earlier disinflation signals in energy contradicted this. Do you want to hold both futures in tension? The discussion unfolds dynamically. The AI cross-references history and client behavior, revealing a gap between what clients say and what they do. AI orchestrators step in. The point isn't to close contradictions, but to hold them until weak signals stabilize. Only then do we scale probes. Within 20 minutes, the board surfaces 3 plausible inflation futures, identifies weak signals for each, and maps them to portfolios and client narratives. For clients, the shift is tangible. Instead of static reports, they enter recursive dialogue with advisors, exploring values, resilience, and futures they co-create. Acme no longer sells portfolio management. It sells adaptive foresight powered by AI recursion as a new cognitive organ for wealth. From this, we can see how an organization utilizes in real time a trained human AI looping procedure to generate in-the-moment results. You see, class, if we go back to our earlier story, we can see how today the situation is different. With humans riffing and engaging with AI through AI-augmented human reasoning as a process, our contractor no longer finds himself unable to talk. The board no longer able to just go along with their prejudices or what they want to hear. AI, you see, is always on, always there. It cannot be ignored, especially not when competitors have their own AIs. Now our contractor is empowered, our board not overridden, but enabled to listen safely and without threat to their position, since it's only their AI. Of course, they could enforce protocols on the AI orchestrators, but that would just mean losing competitive positioning. The class was nearly coming to its end, but Professor Eximius wanted to cover off one more application based on their last class on customer experience management. Sophia had to go for another appointment, so instructed her hologram to leave the lecture theatre. Fortunately, the professor had recorded a copy of his lecture, so later that evening, in the comfort of her home, Sophia reviewed the presentation. The quality on her holoscreen wouldn't be as good, but at least she'd get to understand the implications for customer experience. Customer experience management in the age of AI. You see, class, customer experience management as a discipline fell because it was about human behavior, which is mostly complex adaptive, not linearly predictive. What I mean is customers change their minds, get influenced by factors outside your control, influenced by how they feel in the moment. Like a murmuration of starlings, things shift and change in unpredictable ways. You can only sense that shift as it happens and respond to it. In short, a CAS system that in the 2010s was flattened into inconsequence by linear KPIs and operational processes, neither of which were designed for managing human psychological experience, which of course is a very different beast to mathematical data. The difference, if you like, between the subjective and the objective. However, if customer experience had been jointly managed by an Emergent Systems Board, then different metrics and new novelty might have arisen, and more especially, the boundary condition of linearity would have been removed by the need for epistemic openness. But the catalyst technology, AI superintelligence, and most especially AI riffing, came too late. But now we saw a revitalization in the 2030s. One of the first major applications of Qin Lau, the Recursive Ideas Engine. What is that? Chimed Pelothea. I'll show you. The professor moved to his hyperboard, then putting on his gyroform, a skin-tight glove that rearranged the lecture hall's nanobot lattice and enabled the instantiation of the Recursive Ideas Engine. Here, you see? The professor continued. The Recursive Ideas Engine, RI, emerged as a response to a deep organizational failure. Not a shortage of ideas, data, or intelligence, but the systematic elimination of emergence through premature closure and linear governance. The students looked confused. Let me explain. The RI did not generate ideas. It generated key themes, snippets from an open text comment here, or more directly, an actual idea from a forum there. Consider these short pieces of DNA, if you like. Things such as Node 124, color a website background. It obviously came with some sentiment, but that was not the point. Everything was coded, even if neutral in tone. You see, what we were hunting for with RI was the sense of direction of the conversation. What was growing? What was shrinking? What had depth? The whole flow. But, Professor, wasn't that what those voice of customer platforms were doing? Said Alaric236, chiming in as agent for one of the students in the Pacific Quarter, no doubt currently asleep. Absolutely not, replied the professor, and I'll explain why in a minute. But be clear, RI is a sense-making machine, not an alert system. It's the skin of the company, defining where things are heading, new threats, the temperature of the environment, and yes, something else, holding memory for later. It is not about immediate alert response. But let me reveal what's important. Qin Lau fully launched RI in 2032. Of course, they didn't realize what they had. It was just one designer's realization that a lot of data was not being used in voice of customer systems. So why not use all of it? But you see, he was also trained in sense-making and complex adaptive systems, understanding that in these systems, value is not immediately legible and cannot reliably be decided early with confidence. A brave stance. I'm surprised they let him do it, huffed a cynical student from the back of the hall. Well, remember, there was a lot of experimentation with AI during that time. The idea was probably just to see what would come out if access was given to all data in a firm. Sophia was intrigued by the professor's presentation and decided to find more of his lectures on the Recursive Ideas Engine. The Recursive Ideas Engine, RI, The Recursive Ideas Engine. The Recursive Ideas Engine, RI, was built on a simple insight that the most valuable organizational ideas often do not fail because they are wrong, but because they are premature, misframed, politically inconvenient, or context-dependent. You see, in conventional firms, ideas die early. Learning collapses quickly. Rejection becomes deletion, and memory is erased. By contrast, RI's defining move was to keep ideas alive long enough for their value to emerge. Some in the audience nodded. Others still felt it was a curious beast. Professor Eximius continued undeterred. Rye did not primarily ask, what should we do, or which idea is best. Instead, it asked, what patterns keep recurring? What tensions refuse to disappear? What ideas keep returning in different forms? Its outputs were framed as hypotheses rather than decisions, and it shifted attention from single submissions and alerts to patterns, persistence, and trajectories. In Rye, rejected ideas are still data, and data is retained, not discarded. It's tagged with reasons for rejection, tracked over time, and allowed to re-enter consideration or be recombined when context changes. You see, the system treats idea development as evolutionary, variation, selection, mutation, and retention, rather than the one-way stage gate funnel. Which means Rye changes how time is interpreted. Earlier systems treated time as cost. Rye treats time as information. Persistence, reappearance, and delayed relevance become meaningful signals. An idea that survives repeated rejection over many years can be more valuable than one approved immediately. This is different from existing alerting systems that asked, who should act now? Not what is worth understanding over time. And these systems in the past ingested far less data and, ironically, increased fatigue, asking our teams to answer it all, every single alert. And the sources? Inquired Solarius. Well, Rye draws from explicit and implicit sources. Explicit ideas are handled straightforwardly. They are clustered and reviewed, with humans evaluating clusters rather than line-by-line lists. Implicit ideas, based on, say, text, not yet an idea, are mined for salient experiential signals, and that means text and speech that is neutral in tone, but could later be reframed into hypotheses or idea candidates is considered. The system, you see, is tuned for sense-making, not just immediate actionability. And as you can see, that makes it different from voice of customer systems that only looked for alerts, not sense-making. So, summarized Solarius, we move from customer experience management to sense-making, where even employee suggestions and comments are critical, since they are ideal sense-making candidates who can bootstrap themselves into the world of the customer. Yes, said Professor Eximius, but can you also see how AI is essential to the Recursive Ideas Engine due to its posture? Qin Lau does not generate brilliant ideas, make strategic decisions, or predict outcomes. It remembers without bias, recombines without ego, challenges premature closure without status threat, and can explicitly offer a mode shift, quick answer versus deeper reasoning. And through deeper reasoning, it functions as a reflective debate instrument, analogous, if you like, to clinical, reflective practice. It keeps hypotheses open, surfaces contradictions, and reduces the social cost of disagreement. AI may also generate synthetic recombined ideas as part of recursion, but these must be clearly flagged as synthetic to avoid epistemic laundering and automation bias. Humans remain accountable for interpretation, prioritization, and commitment, as well as being fundamental to that recursion loop to increase the creative potential of ideation. But Professor, Rye couldn't survive in linear functions such as operations because these demand early closure. Exactly, said the professor. Rye requires a separate institutional container, the Emergent Systems Board. The ESB's role is to protect ambiguity from being optimized away, legitimize, not yet, and prioritize sense-making over KPIs, force decisions, and ROI deadlines. Without an Emergent Systems Board, RAI collapses into conventional analytics theatre. With it, organizations can sustain learning in complexity. Used correctly, then, AI can help prioritize attention signals, persistence, recurrence, drift, while humans own meaning and commitment. Faria, summarize for us. Organizations that adopted RAI and the Emergent Systems Board exhibited these changes. Fewer strategic surprises because they noticed earlier. Calmer decision-making. Urgency stopped masquerading as intelligence. Less performative certainty. Leaders could say not yet without penalty. Higher coherence over time. Strategy emerged rather than being declared. And enhanced creative capacity. And demonstration of ROI, completed the professor, ironically, because they tooled out the intermediating noise of aggregated metrics. Now, the action came first before the metric. The overarching lesson is that organizational intelligence fails less from weak tools than from systems that cannot tolerate uncertainty long enough for understanding to form and emerge. The Recursive Ideas Engine did not make organizations smarter, it made them patient, and patience proved to be a rare and valuable capability in complex systems. The audience nodded gently in agreement. RAI and the Emergent Systems Board, the natural consequence of AI. The first complex adaptive technology and system. And in many ways, deeply liberating from the constraints of linearity. The board could now be gently challenged, safely, anonymously, and with the power of a super intelligence from within.